She thought her money could buy anything, including the right to judge people by the color of their skin and the dirt under their nails. Celeste Hart, billionaire heiress, had written off an entire race as too humble for her pristine lifestyle, never imagining that fate would force her into the backseat of a car driven by the very man who would expose every ugly truth about her privileged world. But when her expensive watch goes missing and Malcolm Reed, the black mechanic she'd dismissed, refuses her $1,000 bribe, something shifts in the carefully constructed walls of her ivory tower. What starts as a simple act of integrity becomes a collision course between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Yet just as love begins to bloom in the most unexpected place, a leaked screenshot threatens to destroy everything, and the man she's learned to love discovers exactly what she really thought of him all along. Will Celeste's transformation be enough to overcome the poison of her own words? Or will one moment of honesty destroy the only real love she's ever known? If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because this story of redemption and love will challenge everything you think you know about second chances. The glass walls of Hart Tower stretched up into the gray afternoon sky like a giant mirror. Inside her office on the 40th floor, Celeste Hart tapped her manicured nails against her mahogany desk. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "Where is James?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. Her voice was sharp and cold. Tessa Mora, her assistant, shifted in the doorway. Tessa wore simple black slacks and a white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. "He called in sick, Miss Hart. Food poisoning." Celeste finally looked up. Her blue eyes flashed with anger. "Sick? Today? I have the charity luncheon in 20 minutes. The board is expecting me to give the opening speech." "I know. I'm sorry." Tessa stepped closer. "I can call another service." "No." Celeste stood up and grabbed her cream-colored Chanel purse. "Those drivers don't know the city like James does. They'll get lost or take the wrong route. Mother will have my head if I'm late." The office felt smaller suddenly. Celeste's cream silk blouse was perfectly pressed. Her dark blonde hair fell in smooth waves past her shoulders. Everything about her looked expensive and untouchable. But her hands shook slightly as she checked her reflection in the window. "What about a ride share?" Tessa suggested quietly. Celeste froze. "A ride share? Tessa, are you serious? Those people are so unpredictable." "It's just a car ride, 20 minutes across town." "It's not just a car ride." Celeste's voice rose. "It's about standards, control. I can't show up to give a speech about excellence after riding with some random person who might not even speak English properly." Tessa pulled out her own phone. "I'll book it now. We don't have a choice." Celeste watched her assistant's fingers move across the screen. A sick feeling grew in her stomach. She thought about her mother, Diane Hart, sitting at the head table at the luncheon. Diane would check her diamond watch every 30 seconds until Celeste arrived. The other board members would whisper behind their hands if she was late. "Fine," Celeste said. "But make sure you put in the notes that this is for a corporate client. Tell them to send their best driver." "Done." Tessa looked up. "He'll be here in 3 minutes." Celeste gathered her speech notes and slipped them into her purse. The papers felt heavy in her hands. She had practiced the speech 5 times that morning, but the words still felt foreign in her mouth. Talking about helping poor families was harder when you lived in a world where poor people were invisible. They rode the elevator down in silence. Celeste stared at her reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked perfect, as always. But something felt off today. Maybe it was the way Tessa had said "those people" back to her. Or maybe it was the phone call from her mother that morning. "You know what kind of men you should be dating," Diane had said. "Men who fit our world. Men who understand what's expected." Celeste had nodded along, but the word sat wrong in her chest. She dated men like Evan Klein, rich, white, educated. Men her mother approved of. Men who bored her to tears. The elevator opened into the marble lobby. Through the tall glass windows, Celeste could see a dark blue Honda Civic parked at the curb. It was clean but clearly older. Not the kind of car she usually rode in. That must be him, Tessa said. Celeste took a deep breath. This better not be a mistake. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The doorman held the door open and nodded. Good afternoon, Miss Hart. Thank you, Robert. She stepped out into the cool air. The Honda's driver door opened. A tall black man stepped out. He wore dark jeans and a clean blue button-down shirt. His hair was cut short and neat. He looked to be about 30, with broad shoulders and gentle brown eyes. For a moment, their eyes met across the sidewalk. Celeste felt something strange happen in her chest. Not attraction, exactly. More like recognition. Like seeing someone she was supposed to know, but didn't. The man walked around the car and opened the back door for her. Miss Hart, I'm Malcolm, your driver today. His voice was deep and calm, professional but warm. Celeste felt her polite smile tighten on her face. She slid into the back seat without a word. Malcolm closed her door gently and got back behind the wheel. The car smelled faintly like vanilla air freshener and something else. Something clean and masculine that she couldn't name. The Meridian Hotel downtown? Malcolm asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. Yes. Celeste pulled out her phone. And please hurry. I'm already running late. Yes, ma'am. I'll get you there as quickly and safely as I can. Malcolm pulled into traffic with smooth confidence. He didn't jerk the wheel or brake too hard like some drivers did. His hands on the steering wheel were strong and steady. There was a small scar on his left knuckle. Celeste's phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Diane Hart, she answered. Celeste, where are you? The luncheon started 5 minutes ago. I'm on my way. James called in sick. I had to find another driver. What do you mean, another driver? What service? Celeste glanced up at the rearview mirror. Malcolm's eyes were focused on the road, but she could tell he was listening. It's fine, Mother. I'll be there in 15 minutes. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Diane's voice carried through the speaker. You can't rely on unpredictable people. You need to stick with what you know works. I understand. Celeste's cheeks burned. She ended the call quickly. In the mirror, she saw Malcolm's eyebrows rise slightly. He hadn't said anything, but his jaw looked tighter now. They drove in silence for a few minutes. The city moved past the windows. Tall buildings, busy sidewalks, people hurrying to their own important places. Celeste tried to focus on her speech, but she kept glancing at the back of Malcolm's head. Long day? Malcolm asked suddenly. The question surprised her. James never made small talk unless she started it first. Yes, she said. Very long. Big speech today? A charity luncheon. For underprivileged families. The words felt awkward coming out of her mouth. Malcolm nodded. That's good work. Important work. Something in his tone made her look up. You think so? I do. Not everyone with the power to help actually does it. There was no judgment in his voice, but Celeste felt judged anyway. She thought about the speech in her purse. All those careful words about helping the less fortunate. Written by her publicist. Practiced, but not felt. What do you do when you're not driving? She asked. I'm a mechanic. I work at Rodriguez Auto Repair in the evenings and weekends. This is just part-time. A mechanic. The word came out flatter than she meant it to. Yes, ma'am. I fix cars. Something in his tone had changed. Cooler now. More distant. That must be humble work, Celeste said. The car went completely quiet. Malcolm's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. In the mirror, his eyes met hers directly. Humble? He asked. Celeste felt heat rise up her neck. I mean, simple, honest, you know. No, ma'am, I don't know. Malcolm's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath it. Could you explain what you mean by humble? The question hung in the air between them. Celeste opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. What did she mean? That fixing cars was beneath her world? That manual labor was less important than board meetings and charity speeches? I just meant, she started. You meant that what I do isn't as important as what you do. Malcolm's voice stayed respectful, but firm. That working with my hands makes me... What? Less ambitious? Less intelligent? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. They stopped at a red light. Malcolm turned in his seat to look at her directly. His brown eyes were calm but serious. Miss Hart, I'll get you to your destination safely and on time. That's what you're paying for. But I won't sit here quietly while you decide who I am, based on what you think my job means about me. Celeste felt like she'd been slapped. Not because he was rude. He wasn't. Because he was right. And because no one ever talked to her like that. Like she was a real person who could be wrong about something. She started, then stopped. The light turned green. Malcolm faced forward and drove on. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. Celeste stared out the window, but she wasn't seeing the city anymore. She was thinking about the way Malcolm had looked at her, not with anger or hurt, with disappointment. When they pulled up to the hotel, Malcolm got out and opened her door. Celeste stepped onto the sidewalk, but she didn't walk away immediately. Thank you, she said quietly. Malcolm nodded. Have a good day, Miss Hart. He got back in the car and pulled away from the curb. Celeste watched until the Honda disappeared into traffic. Then she turned toward the hotel entrance, her head spinning. The luncheon was everything she expected. Polite applause, careful smiles, her mother watching from the front table with approval. Celeste gave her speech about helping families in need, and everyone nodded along. But the whole time, she kept thinking about Malcolm's question. What did she mean by humble? That evening, Celeste kicked off her heels in the entryway of her penthouse. Her feet ached, and her head felt heavy. The apartment was beautiful, all white walls and expensive art. But it felt empty tonight. Rough day? Tessa asked. She was sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop, finishing up some work. Something like that. Celeste poured herself a glass of white wine. The driver today. He was different. Different how? He talked back to me. Tessa looked up from her computer. Talked back, or just talked? He called me out, said I was judging him. Celeste took a sip of wine. Can you believe that? What were you judging him about? Celeste paused. I said his job was humble. He got offended. Were you being condescending? No, I was being accurate. He fixes cars for a living. That's humble work compared to what we do. Tessa closed her laptop. Celeste, do you hear yourself? What do you mean? You're talking about this man like his work is worth less than yours, because he uses his hands instead of sitting in boardrooms. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Celeste set down her wine glass harder than she intended. Why is everyone asking me that today? Maybe because you're not being as clear as you think you are. Before Celeste could respond, her phone rang. Diane's name flashed on the screen again. Hello, Mother. Celeste, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. About the kind of men you should be dating. Celeste rubbed her forehead. Mother, I'm tired. Evan Klein will be at the museum gala this weekend. His father and I think you two would make a lovely couple. Evan is boring. Evan is appropriate. He comes from good family. He understands our world. Our world, Celeste repeated. What does that mean exactly? Don't be difficult, dear. You know exactly what it means. People who share our values, our background, our standards. After Diane hung up, Celeste sat in her kitchen thinking. She pulled out her phone and opened a group text with her college friends. They were talking about dating, as usual. Sarah: met this guy at yoga. He's sweet, but he's a teacher. Not sure if that's enough. Lauren: what do you mean, not enough? Sarah: you know. Ambition, drive, money. Jessica: I get it. I need someone who matches my energy. Celeste stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, I avoid dating black guys. Too humble for my lifestyle. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she hit send. The responses came quickly. Sarah: girl, that sounds harsh. Lauren: humble how? Jessica: are you sure that's not just stereotype thinking? Celeste turned off her phone without responding. She didn't want to explain herself again. She was tired of explaining herself. But as she got ready for bed, she kept thinking about Malcolm's calm voice asking her what she meant, and about the way he'd refused to accept her dismissal of his work. She was brushing her teeth when she realized her expensive watch was missing from her wrist. The Cartier bracelet watch her father had given her for her 25th birthday, worth more than most people made in a year. Panic shot through her chest. She searched her bathroom counter, then her bedroom. Nothing. The car. It had to have fallen off in the car. But Malcolm was long gone, and she had no way to contact him. The watch was probably lost forever. Celeste sat on her bed in her silk pajamas, staring at her bare wrist. For some reason, losing the watch felt like more than just losing jewelry. It felt like losing something she couldn't name. Malcolm ended his last ride of the night around 11 p.m. He'd driven 6 people to various places around the city. A couple going to dinner, a businessman heading to the airport, 2 college students bar hopping. None of them had made him feel as unsettled as his afternoon passenger. He parked outside his apartment building and turned off the engine. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic on the main road. He lived in a working-class neighborhood where people minded their own business and helped each other when times got tough. Malcolm had grown up here. His mother had raised him and his sister Nia in the small apartment upstairs after their father died in a construction accident when Malcolm was 15. He'd learned to fix cars from his neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, who eventually hired him at his shop. It was a good life. Simple, maybe, but honest. He took pride in his work, both driving and fixing engines. He was good with his hands and good with people. Usually. Today had been different. Something about the way Celeste Hart had said humble had gotten under his skin, like she was talking about a pet that had learned a cute trick. Malcolm cleaned out the back seat of his Honda, checking for anything passengers might have left behind. In the corner, wedged between the seat and the door, something glinted in the streetlight. A watch. Expensive looking. White gold with diamonds around the face. Malcolm picked it up carefully. It was heavy and warm from the car's heat. The kind of watch that cost more than he made in 6 months. Celeste Hart's watch. He sat in his car holding the piece of jewelry, thinking. He could keep it. She'd never know what happened to it. Rich people lost expensive things all the time, and just bought new ones. But even as the thought crossed his mind, Malcolm knew he wouldn't do it. His mother had raised him better than that. Your character, she used to say, is what you do when no one's watching. Malcolm pulled out his phone and opened the rideshare app. He found Celeste's trip in his history and hit the Report Lost item button. The app asked him to describe what he'd found and said it would contact the passenger. Within 10 minutes, his phone rang. Hello? Is this Malcolm? The driver from this afternoon? The voice was tense, worried. Yes, ma'am. I found your watch. It was wedged in the back seat. A long pause. Oh, thank God. I thought it was gone forever. I can drop it off at Hart Tower if you'd like. The security desk should be able to... No, she said quickly. I mean, I'd rather get it directly. Can you meet me there? I'll come down to the lobby. Malcolm looked at his clock. It was almost midnight. "Are you sure? It's pretty late. Please, this watch. It was my father's gift. It means a lot to me." Something in her voice made him say yes. 30 minutes later, Malcolm stood in the marble lobby of Hart Tower holding a small velvet box he'd found in his glove compartment. The security guard had called upstairs, and now Malcolm waited, feeling out of place among all the expensive marble and gold fixtures. The elevator opened, and Celeste Hart stepped out. She looked different than she had that afternoon. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore jeans and a long coat. No makeup. She looked younger, more human. "Malcolm." She walked toward him, her steps echoing in the empty lobby. "Thank you so much for bringing this back." He held out the box. "Of course." She opened it, and her shoulders sagged with relief. "I can't believe you found it, and brought it back so late." Celeste reached into her purse and pulled out a thick roll of cash. "Here, for your trouble." Malcolm looked at the money. There had to be $1,000 there, maybe more. "No, thank you." "What?" She blinked at him. "I said no, thank you. I don't want your money." "But you drove all the way here, and you could have just kept the watch. I want to pay you." "Don't insult me." The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Celeste took a step back. "I'm not insulting you. I'm trying to thank you. With money. Like that's all I understand." They stood there looking at each other across the marble floor. The security guard pretended to read something at his desk. "I don't know how else to thank you," Celeste said quietly. "You just did. You said thank you. That's enough." Something shifted in her expression, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "I owe you an apology," she said, "for this afternoon. What I said about your work being humble, that was condescending and wrong." Malcolm studied her face. She looked sincere, but he'd heard apologies from rich people before, usually followed by "but" and an explanation of why they weren't really sorry. "I appreciate that," he said carefully. "I grew up thinking certain things about certain people. But that doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." They walked toward the door together. Outside on the sidewalk, Celeste noticed Malcolm's Honda parked at the curb. "Your car," she said. "It's older, but it's really clean." "I take care of my things." "You said you're a mechanic?" "Rodriguez Auto Repair, nights and weekends." "Do you like it, fixing cars?" Malcolm looked at her, surprised by the question. "Yeah, I do. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again, and I'm good at it." "I bet you are." They stood there for another moment. The street was empty except for a few cars passing by. "Can I ask you something?" Malcolm said. "Sure. This afternoon when you said my work was humble, what did you really mean?" Celeste was quiet for a long time. "I meant that it was beneath me, beneath my world. I meant that you were less than the men I usually spend time with." The honesty surprised him. "And now?" "Now I think maybe my world is smaller than I thought it was." Malcolm nodded. "Be careful who you decide people are," he said. "Sometimes you might be wrong." He got in his car and drove away, leaving Celeste standing under the streetlights. Back in her penthouse, Celeste sat on her white leather couch with the watch in her hands. It felt heavier now than it had before she'd lost it. She thought about the roll of cash in her purse. $1,000. Enough to pay Malcolm's rent for 2 months, probably. Maybe 3. But he'd said no. Not just no. He'd been offended that she'd offered. "Don't insult me." No one had ever refused her money before. Rich people, poor people, anyone in between. They all took what she offered. Money was how she solved problems, how she showed appreciation, how she kept people at arm's length while still being generous. Malcolm had refused it like she'd offered him scraps. Celeste looked around her beautiful, empty apartment. Everything in it cost more than most people made in a year, but tonight it just felt cold. She picked up her phone and looked at the group text again. Her message about black men being too humble had gotten 3 more responses while she was downstairs. Sarah, maybe give one a chance. You might be surprised. Lauren, some of the most successful men I know are black, and humble isn't always bad. Jessica, girl, you sound like your mother. That last one made Celeste's stomach turn. She did sound like her mother. All worried about appearances and status and who was appropriate. But Malcolm wasn't humble in the way she'd meant. He was confident, strong. He'd stood up to her when she was being condescending. He'd refused her money because he had principles. Maybe humble wasn't the right word at all. The next morning, Celeste followed her usual routine. Coffee made by her housekeeper. Shower, hair and makeup, expensive suit. Everything perfect and controlled. But when she got to the parking garage, her BMW made an ugly grinding sound when she started it. Damn it, she muttered. She called her usual luxury service center. The earliest we can see you is Thursday, the receptionist said. We're completely booked. Thursday was 3 days away. Celeste had meetings all week, including dinner with potential investors tomorrow night. She sat in her car thinking. Then, before she could change her mind, she pulled out her phone and opened the rideshare app. Malcolm's trip was still in her history. She clicked on it and found a message driver option. Hi, this is Celeste from yesterday. My car is making a strange noise and my usual place can't see me until Thursday. You mentioned you're a mechanic. Could you recommend somewhere that might be able to take a look sooner? Thank you. She sent the message and immediately felt stupid. Like she was bothering him, like he'd probably ignore her. But 20 minutes later, while she was sitting in a boring marketing meeting, her phone buzzed with a reply. I can take a look after my shift tonight if you want. Fair warning, I work out of a regular neighborhood garage, not some fancy place. And you'll be treated like every other customer. No special treatment. If you're okay with that, I get off at 7. Celeste stared at the message. No special treatment. She'd never been anywhere that she wasn't treated special. She typed back, That's fine. Where should I meet you? By 6:30 that evening, Celeste was driving her grinding BMW through a neighborhood she'd never seen before. Small houses with chain-link fences, kids playing basketball in the street, women sitting on front porches talking to their neighbors. Rodriguez Auto Repair sat on a corner lot. The building was old brick with big garage doors and a hand-painted sign. Cars in various states of repair filled the small parking lot. Celeste parked and got out, very aware that her designer coat and heels made her look like she'd landed from another planet. Inside the garage, 3 men worked on different cars. The air smelled like motor oil and metal. Classic rock played from a radio in the corner. Malcolm was under the hood of an old pickup truck, his hands black with grease. He wore coveralls over his regular clothes and safety glasses pushed up on his forehead. Malcolm? She called. He looked up and smiled slightly. Miss Hart, right on time. An older Latino man approached them. His coveralls had Rodriguez embroidered on the pocket. This is my boss, Mr. Rodriguez, Malcolm said. Mr. Rodriguez, this is the customer I told you about. Mr. Rodriguez shook Celeste's hand with his clean one. Welcome to our shop. Malcolm says your car is making noise? Yes, a grinding sound when I start it. Let's take a look. For the next hour, Celeste sat in the small office while Malcolm and Mr. Rodriguez diagnosed her car. Through the window, she watched Malcolm work. His movements were confident and precise. He explained things to Mr. Rodriguez in technical terms she didn't understand, but it was clear he knew what he was doing. Other customers came and went. A young mother with 2 kids who needed an oil change. An elderly man picking up his sedan. A teenager whose parents had sent him to get an estimate for bodywork. Malcolm treated everyone the same. Respectful, patient, honest about costs and timing. He didn't rush anyone or talk down to them. When the teenager worried about how much the bodywork would cost, Malcolm suggested a cheaper alternative that would still be safe. This was what humble actually meant, Celeste realized. Not lesser or beneath anyone. Humble like down to earth. Like genuine. Miss Hart? Malcolm appeared in the office doorway. His coveralls were unzipped, revealing the blue shirt underneath. We found the problem. It's a worn belt and a loose pulley. Not dangerous, but it'll get worse if you don't fix it. How much? $200 for parts and labor. We can have it done by tomorrow evening. $200. She'd spent more than that on lunch yesterday. That's fine. She started to pull out her credit card. You pay at the front desk like everyone else, Malcolm said gently. Right. No special treatment. Celeste paid Mr. Rodriguez and arranged to pick up her car the next evening. When she came back outside, Malcolm was washing his hands at a utility sink. Thank you for squeezing me in, she said. No problem. Rodriguez is good about helping people out. And you? Are you good about helping people out? Malcolm dried his hands on a paper towel and looked at her. Depends on the people. What about me? Jury's still out. But he was almost smiling when he said it. Can I ask you something? Celeste said. Shoot. Yesterday, when I offered you money for returning my watch, you said not to insult you, but I wasn't trying to insult you. I was genuinely trying to thank you. I know. Then why was it insulting? Malcolm leaned against the workbench. Because money isn't how you thank someone for doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is just what you do. It's not a transaction. But in my world, in your world, everything has a price. I get that. But some things shouldn't. Celeste felt that strange recognition again. Like Malcolm was showing her something she'd forgotten she knew. I'm still learning, she said quietly. We all are. As Celeste drove home in her rental car, she thought about the way Malcolm had moved around the garage. Confident, but not cocky. Skilled, but not show-offy. The other mechanics clearly respected him, and he clearly respected them back. It wasn't humble in the way she'd originally meant. It was something better. It was real. For the first time in years, Celeste felt like she'd spent the evening somewhere that mattered. Not because of money or status or who might see her there, but because she'd watched someone she was starting to respect do work he was good at. Work that actually helped people. Maybe that was what she'd been missing all along. The next evening, Celeste drove her rental car back to Rodriguez Auto Repair. The neighborhood looked different in the early evening light. Warmer, somehow. Kids rode bikes on the sidewalks while their parents sat on front steps, talking and laughing. She pulled into the garage parking lot just as Malcolm was walking out of the building. He'd changed out of his coveralls into dark jeans and a gray sweater. He looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd had a good day at work. Perfect timing, he called out. Your car's ready. Inside the garage, her BMW sat in the same spot where she'd left it. But something was different. The car looked cleaner. Someone had washed it. We always wash the cars when we're done, Mr. Rodriguez explained, handing her the keys. Part of the service. Thank you. Celeste looked at the invoice. $200, exactly as quoted. No hidden fees, no markup for being a rich customer. It looks great. Malcolm did most of the work, Mr. Rodriguez said. He's got good hands for this kind of thing. Malcolm ducked his head slightly, embarrassed by the praise. It was straightforward. Belt and pulley, like we said. Celeste started the car. No grinding. The engine purred smoothly. It sounds perfect. Should be good for another 50,000 miles, Malcolm said. As she prepared to leave, Celeste felt an unexpected reluctance. The garage felt real in a way her usual luxury service center didn't. No one was trying to sell her things she didn't need, or treating her like she was made of glass. "Malcolm," she said before she could stop herself. "Would you like to get coffee sometime? I mean, as a thank you for helping me out." The question hung in the air between them. Malcolm's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Rodriguez suddenly found something very interesting to look at on his workbench. "Coffee?" Malcolm asked. "Yes, just coffee. I know a nice place downtown. I don't drink coffee." "Oh." Celeste felt her cheeks heat up. "Tea, then. Or we could— Miss Hart." Malcolm's voice was gentle but firm. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because we're from different worlds. And I've learned that when people from your world want to have coffee with people from mine, it usually doesn't end well." The words stung because they were probably true. How many times had she grabbed coffee with someone interesting from outside her circle, then gone back to her real life like nothing had happened? "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry I asked." Malcolm's expression softened slightly. "I'm not trying to be rude. I just know how these things go." "How do they go?" "Rich person meets working person. Rich person thinks it's charming to slum it for a while. Working person gets invested. Rich person gets bored and goes back to their real life. Working person gets hurt." Celeste opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. Because wasn't that exactly what she was doing? Finding Malcolm charming and authentic like he was some kind of experience she could try on? "You're right," she said again. "That's probably exactly what would happen." She got in her car and drove away, but something heavy sat in her chest the whole way home. That weekend was the museum gala. Celeste spent Saturday afternoon getting ready. Hair appointment, facial, manicure. The dress she'd chosen was midnight blue silk that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her mother picked her up in the family's Rolls-Royce. Diane looked perfect, as always, in cream-colored Chanel and pearls. "You look lovely, dear," Diane said as they rode toward downtown. "Evan is very excited to see you." "I'm sure he is." "Don't be snide. Evan comes from an excellent family. His father owns 3 hotels in Europe. He's exactly the kind of man you should be considering." Celeste stared out the window at the city passing by. They drove through Malcolm's neighborhood on the way to the museum. She could see the corner where Rodriguez Auto Repair sat, but the garage was closed for the night. "Mother, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What's the most important thing in a relationship?" Diane looked at her strangely. "Security, of course. Financial security, social security, emotional security. You need to be able to trust that the person you're with can provide for you and protect your interests." "What about love?" "Love fades, Celeste. Security lasts. Love is what you have after you've built a solid foundation based on shared values and mutual benefit." Shared values. Celeste wondered what Malcolm's values were. Honesty, clearly. Hard work. Treating people with respect regardless of their bank account. What were her values? She wasn't sure she knew anymore. The museum was exactly what she'd expected. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes making beautiful small talk about nothing important. Celeste moved through the crowd like she was sleepwalking. Evan found her during cocktail hour. He was handsome in a generic way. Tall, blonde, square jaw, expensive suit. The kind of man who looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog. "Celeste, you look stunning." He kissed her cheek and handed her a glass of champagne. "I've been looking forward to this all week." "Hello, Evan." They made small talk about his recent trip to Switzerland, her work with various charities, mutual friends, and their latest engagements or divorces. The conversation felt like reading from a script. During dinner, Celeste found herself sitting between Evan and one of her mother's friends, Mrs. Patterson. The table was full of people she'd known her entire life, all talking about the same things they always talked about. "Did you hear about the Hartwell's daughter?" Mrs. Patterson whispered. "She's dating some artist. Lives in a studio apartment in Brooklyn. Can you imagine? How embarrassing for Margaret, someone else said. All that money spent on her education, and she throws it away on some starving artist. Young women today don't understand the importance of choosing the right sort of man, Diane added. They get caught up in romantic nonsense instead of practical considerations. Celeste thought about Malcolm's hands, strong and capable on her car engine, about the way he'd refused her money because he had principles, about how he'd treated every customer at the garage with the same respect. What if the wrong sort of man makes her happy? Celeste asked. The table went quiet for a moment. Happiness is temporary, Diane said. A good marriage is a partnership based on shared goals and compatible lifestyles. But what if they love each other? Mrs. Patterson laughed. Oh, darling, love is lovely, but it doesn't pay the bills or maintain social standing. The Hartwell girl will realize that eventually. After dinner, there were speeches about the museum's new wing. Celeste smiled and applauded at the right moments, but she felt like she was watching everything from very far away. Evan walked her to the ladies' room during the break between speeches. You seem distracted tonight, he said. Everything all right? Just tired. Well, I hope you're not too tired for what I want to talk to you about. Evan's smile was confident and presumptuous. I think it's time we started talking about our future together. Our future? Come on, Celeste. We both know where this is heading. Our families have been hoping we'd get together for years. We make sense. Same background, same goals, same social circle. Celeste looked at Evan's handsome face. He was everything she was supposed to want. Rich, educated, appropriate. Her mother would be thrilled. What if I don't want the same things as you? She asked. Evan laughed. Of course you do. You want security, status, a good life. I can give you all of that. What if I want love? We can have love too. Love grows from respect and compatibility. We have both. But standing there in the museum hallway, surrounded by priceless art and rich people, Celeste realized she didn't respect Evan at all. He was boring and entitled, and he assumed she'd fall into line with his plans, because that's what women like her were supposed to do. I need to think about things, she said. Think about what? Celeste, we're perfect for each other. Are we? Yes. Ask anyone. That was the problem, Celeste thought. Everyone would say they were perfect together, and maybe that was exactly what was wrong with it. On Monday morning, Celeste drove to work in her perfectly repaired BMW. The car ran smoothly, just like Malcolm had promised. At a red light, she found herself wondering what he was doing. Probably fixing someone else's car, solving someone else's problems with his capable hands. At work, Tessa brought her coffee and her schedule for the day. How was the gala? Tessa asked. The usual, pretty and pointless. And Evan wants to talk about our future. That's exciting. Is it? Celeste looked up from her calendar. Tessa, what do you think is the most important thing in a relationship? Tessa blinked in surprise. Honestly, I think it's respect. And laughter. If you can't respect someone or laugh with them, what's the point? Respect and laughter. Celeste thought about her conversations with Malcolm, how he'd challenged her assumptions, how she'd almost smiled despite herself when he'd said the jury was still out on whether he'd help her. Have you ever dated someone your family didn't approve of? Celeste asked. Sure. In college, I dated this guy who wanted to be a musician. My parents thought he was wasting his life. Turned out they were right about him specifically, but not about musicians in general. My husband now is a music teacher. Makes decent money, loves his job, treats me like a queen. My parents adore him. What changed their minds? They saw how happy he made me, and how much he respected me and my goals. They realized that someone doesn't have to make $1 million to be worth loving. That afternoon, Celeste made a decision that surprised even her. She left work early and drove to Malcolm's neighborhood. Not to the garage. She didn't want to bother him at work. But she'd noticed a small coffee shop on the corner during her visits, and she was curious about the neighborhood. The coffee shop was called Alma's, and it was nothing like the trendy places she usually went to. Mismatched chairs, local art on the walls, the smell of actual food instead of just overpriced pastries. Most of the customers looked like they lived or worked nearby. Celeste ordered tea and sat at a small table by the window. She pulled out her laptop and tried to work, but mostly she people-watched. A young mother came in with 2 toddlers. The woman behind the counter, probably Alma, gave the kids free cookies and chatted with the mother about daycare problems. An elderly man played chess by himself at a corner table while reading a paperback book. 3 teenagers shared a piece of cake and talked about their part-time jobs. Everyone seemed to know everyone else. It was like a community instead of just a business. Miss Hart? Celeste looked up to see a teenage black girl standing next to her table. The girl had Malcolm's eyes and his serious expression. Yes? I'm Nia, Malcolm's sister. He told me about you. Celeste's stomach dropped. Oh, hello. Can I sit? Of course. Nia pulled out a chair and sat down. She was maybe 17, pretty and sharp-looking, wearing a school uniform and carrying a backpack full of books. What did Malcolm tell you about me? Celeste asked carefully. That you're rich and used to getting your way, and that you said something insulting about his work, but then apologized. Nia studied Celeste's face. He also said you returned to the garage for car repair, which surprised him. Why did it surprise him? Because rich people don't usually come to our neighborhood twice. Once is enough for the experience. Twice means you might actually need something. The words stung because they were probably true. What do you think I need? Celeste asked. Nia shrugged. That's not for me to say. But I'll tell you this, my brother is a good man. Really good. He's been taking care of me since I was 10, and our mom died. He works 2 jobs to make sure I can focus on school instead of worrying about bills. I didn't know about your mother. I'm sorry. He doesn't talk about it much. But the point is, Malcolm doesn't have time for games. He doesn't have time for someone to play around with his feelings while they figure out what they want. I'm not playing games. Aren't you? Nia leaned forward. You asked him for coffee. He said no because he knows how this story goes. Rich girl gets curious about the interesting poor guy. Has some fun. Goes back to her real life. Poor guy gets hurt. What if that's not what I'm doing? Then prove it. How? Nia stood up and shouldered her backpack. Figure that out yourself. But if you hurt my brother, you'll have to deal with me. And I'm a lot meaner than he is. She walked away, leaving Celeste sitting alone with her tea and her thoughts. That evening, Celeste sat in her penthouse kitchen, thinking about her conversation with Nia. The teenager had been protective and direct in a way that reminded her of Malcolm. No games, no politeness for politeness' sake. Just honesty. Her phone rang. Evan's name appeared on the screen. Hello. Celeste, I've been thinking about our conversation Saturday night. I think I came on too strong, but I want you to know my feelings are genuine. Evan, let me take you to dinner this week, somewhere special. We can talk properly about us. Celeste looked around her beautiful, empty apartment. Evan was offering her exactly the life she'd been raised to want. Parties and galas and social events with the right people, financial security and social status and her mother's approval. But when she tried to picture herself at dinner with Evan, all she could think about was Malcolm's question. What do you mean by humble? I need some time, she said. Time for what? To figure out what I actually want. Celeste, you're overthinking this. We make sense together. Maybe that's the problem. After she hung up, Celeste sat in her kitchen for a long time. Everything in her life made sense on paper. Her job, her social circle, the men she was supposed to date. All of it was logical and appropriate, and exactly what she'd been raised to expect, but none of it felt real. The next few days passed slowly. Celeste went to work, attended meetings, had lunch with appropriate people. But everywhere she went, she found herself thinking about Malcolm's garage, about the way he'd treated every customer with the same respect, about the pride he took in doing good work, about the way he'd refused her money because doing the right thing shouldn't be a transaction. On Thursday evening, Celeste made another impulsive decision. She drove to Rodriguez Auto Repair just as they were closing up. Malcolm was in the parking lot, loading tools into the back of his Honda. Miss Hart. He looked surprised but not unhappy to see her. Car problems again? No. The car runs perfectly. She got out and walked toward him. I wanted to talk to you. About what? About coffee. And why you said no. Malcolm closed the back of his car and turned to face her. I thought I explained that. You did. And you were probably right about my motivations. Celeste took a deep breath. But what if you were wrong? Was I? I don't know. Maybe. I've been thinking about what you said about people from my world treating people from your world like experiences. And I think that's probably what I was doing at first. At first? When I asked you for coffee, I think I was curious about you the way I might be curious about a museum exhibit. Something interesting to look at for a while before going back to my real life. Malcolm's expression was unreadable. And now? Now I think my real life might be the problem. They stood in the parking lot as the sun set behind the garage. The neighborhood was settling into evening. Kids being called in for dinner, people coming home from work, the sound of life happening all around them. I met your sister, Celeste said. Nia? Where? At the coffee shop on the corner. She wanted to make sure I wasn't going to hurt you. She's protective. She told me about your mother and about how you've been taking care of her. I'm sorry I didn't know. Malcolm shrugged. It's not something I advertise, but yeah, it's been just us for a while now. That must be hard. It's life. You do what needs doing. Celeste thought about her own life. When had she ever done something that needed doing? When had she ever sacrificed anything important for someone else? Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. If I was different, if I wasn't, the way I am, would you want to have coffee with me then? Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. That's a complicated question. How? Because you are the way you are. Rich, privileged, used to getting what you want. That's not something you can just take off like a coat. But what if I could change? Change how? I don't know yet. But what if I could? Malcolm looked at her seriously. Why would you want to? Because everything in my life is exactly what I'm supposed to want, and none of it makes me happy. The words came out in a rush. Because my mother wants me to marry a man who bores me to tears because he's appropriate. Because I spend my time at charity events talking about helping people I've never actually met. Because I've been living in a bubble my whole life and I'm starting to think the bubble is suffocating me. And you think I'm the answer to that? No. I think maybe getting to know you might be part of figuring out what the answer is. They stood there looking at each other across the parking lot. Finally, Malcolm spoke. There's a community center about 6 blocks from here. They serve dinner to families on Friday nights. Not fancy food, just basic meals for people who need them. I volunteer there sometimes when I'm not working. Okay. If you want to understand my world better, you could come help out Friday. But it's not a date. It's work. Real work. And you'd have to dress like you're actually planning to work, not like you're going to a photo shoot. Celeste felt her heart speed up. You want me to volunteer? I want you to understand what it's like to help people without getting anything back. No tax write-offs, no social credit, no photo opportunities, just serving food to families who need dinner. And if I do that, if you do that and you don't hate it, and you don't make anyone feel bad about needing help, then maybe we can talk about coffee. It wasn't what Celeste had expected, but it was real in a way that felt both terrifying and exciting. "Okay," she said. "I'll be there." Malcolm gave her the address and told her to be there at 5 o'clock Friday evening. "And Miss Hart, wear clothes you don't mind getting food on. This isn't a cocktail party." As Celeste drove home, she felt nervous in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of nervous she felt before board meetings or charity speeches. This was different. This was the fear of not being good enough at something that actually mattered. For the first time in her life, she was going to do something where her money and her name and her connections wouldn't help her at all. She was going to have to figure out who she was when all of that was stripped away. The thought terrified her, but it also made her feel more awake than she'd felt in years. Friday evening arrived gray and drizzly. Celeste stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes trying to figure out what clothes you don't mind getting food on meant. Finally, she settled on dark jeans, sneakers, and a simple black sweater. No jewelry except her father's watch. No makeup except the basics. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Without all the armor of expensive clothes and perfect hair, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. The community center was a low brick building with a hand-painted sign. The parking lot was full of older cars and minivans. Through the windows, Celeste could see people moving around inside, setting up tables and carrying large pots. She sat in her BMW for a moment, gathering courage. This was it. No going back to treating Malcolm like an interesting experiment. If she walked through those doors, she was committing to something real. Celeste took a deep breath and got out of the car. Inside, the community center was warm and busy. Folding tables were set up in rows, and a dozen volunteers moved efficiently around a small kitchen area. The smell of cooking food filled the air, something hearty and comforting. Malcolm saw her first. He was carrying a huge pot of what looked like chili, wearing an apron over jeans and a t-shirt. When their eyes met across the room, his face showed surprise and something else. Relief, maybe. "You came," he said when he reached her. "I said I would." People say a lot of things. A middle-aged Latina woman approached them. She was tiny, but moved with the efficiency of someone who ran things. "Malcolm, who's your friend?" she asked. "Mrs. Valdez. This is Celeste. She wants to help out tonight." Mrs. Valdez looked Celeste up and down, taking in the designer jeans and the expensive watch. "You ever served food to people before, mija?" "No, ma'am." "Well, it's not complicated. You smile, you serve, you don't ask questions about people's situations. Everyone gets treated with respect no matter what. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Malcolm, get her an apron and show her how we do things." For the next 3 hours, Celeste ladled chili into bowls, cut up bread, and refilled water glasses. The families who came for dinner were all different. Young mothers with children, elderly couples, teenagers who looked like they were on their own. Some people were chatty and grateful. Others ate quickly and left without much conversation. Malcolm was right. This wasn't about tax write-offs or charity galas. This was just feeding people who needed food. Simple and direct and real. "You're doing good," Malcolm said during a quiet moment. They were standing side by side, refilling serving bowls. "Mrs. Valdez was testing you earlier, by the way. She wanted to see if you'd treat people like charity cases or like neighbors." "Which am I doing?" "Neighbors. You're treating them like neighbors." Something warm spread through Celeste's chest at the approval in his voice. As the evening wound down, Celeste helped clean tables and wash dishes. Her hands were red from hot dishwater, and her feet hurt from standing, but she felt more useful than she had in months. "Not what you expected?" Malcolm asked as they stacked chairs. "No, it's better." Celeste wiped down another table. "At charity events, we talk about helping people, but the people aren't actually there. They're abstract. This is real." "Real," she agreed. When everything was cleaned up, Malcolm walked her to her car. The parking lot was mostly empty now, and the evening air was cool. "So," he said. "Coffee?" Celeste smiled. "I'd like that. There's a place near my apartment. Nothing fancy, but they make good coffee, and they have tea if you prefer." "Coffee sounds perfect." They arranged to meet Saturday afternoon at a place called Rita's Cafe. As Malcolm got in his Honda, Celeste felt lighter than she had in weeks. She'd passed some kind of test tonight, but more importantly, she'd learned something about herself. When stripped of all her advantages and expectations, she was capable of doing useful work. She was capable of treating people with genuine respect instead of condescending charity. Maybe that was enough to build on. Maybe that was enough for coffee to become something more. Saturday afternoon arrived bright and clear. Celeste changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans, a soft blue sweater, and flats. She wanted to look nice but not overdressed. Not like she was trying too hard. Rita's Cafe was nothing like the sleek coffee shops in her neighborhood. The building was narrow and old, squeezed between a laundromat and a used bookstore. Inside, mismatched furniture filled the small space. Local art covered the walls, and soft jazz played from speakers that had seen better days. Malcolm was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. He wore jeans and a green sweater that brought out his brown eyes. When he saw her, he stood up and smiled. "You found it okay?" "GPS is amazing," Celeste said, sitting across from him. "This place is charming. Rita's been here for 20 years, makes the best coffee in the neighborhood." A middle-aged woman with graying curls approached their table. "Malcolm, honey, good to see you. And who's this beautiful lady?" "Rita, this is Celeste. Celeste, Rita owns this place." "Welcome, sweetheart. What can I get you?" "Coffee, please. Just black." "Coming right up." When Rita walked away, Malcolm raised his eyebrows. "Black coffee? I thought you were a tea person." "I'm trying new things." They talked easily for the first time since they'd met. Malcolm told her about growing up in the neighborhood, about learning to fix cars from Mr. Rodriguez when he was 15. Celeste found herself sharing stories about college, about traveling to Europe with her mother, about feeling lost in boardrooms full of people twice her age. "What made you want to take over your family's business?" Malcolm asked. "I'm not sure I did want it." The words surprised Celeste as much as they seemed to surprise Malcolm. "I think it was just expected. My father built hard industries from nothing, and when he died, everyone assumed I'd step in eventually." "What would you have chosen instead?" "I don't know, maybe teaching. I majored in education before I switched to business." She stirred her coffee, thinking. "I used to tutor kids at an after-school program in college. I loved it." "What stopped you?" "Reality, I guess. Family pressure. The idea that teaching wasn't enough." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "Enough for who?" "My mother, society. I don't know. People with money are supposed to make more money, not waste their education on a teacher's salary. You know teachers change lives, right? They shape who people become." "I know that, but try explaining it to someone who measures success in stock prices and real estate portfolios." They sat quietly for a moment. Through the window, Celeste watched people walking by, families with strollers, teenagers in groups, elderly couples holding hands, normal people living normal lives. "Can I ask you something?" Malcolm said. "Sure." "What was it really like, growing up the way you did?" "Lonely," Celeste answered without thinking. Then she blushed at her honesty. "Lonely how?" "Everything was about image. How things looked from the outside. I had everything a kid could want. Private schools, expensive clothes, trips to Europe. But I never felt like I could just be myself." "Who is yourself?" Celeste thought about it. "I'm still figuring that out." Malcolm smiled. "Fair enough." They talked for 2 hours. about books and movies, about places they'd traveled, about dreams they'd had as kids. Celeste discovered that Malcolm read constantly, mostly biographies and history. He told her about wanting to open his own garage someday, about maybe teaching automotive repair to kids who needed job skills. You want to teach too, she realized. Different kind of teaching, but yeah. I like showing people how things work, how to fix what's broken. Maybe we're not so different after all. Malcolm looked at her seriously. Maybe not. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was starting to set. They walked slowly toward their cars, both reluctant to end the afternoon. I had a really good time, Celeste said when they reached her BMW. Me too. Malcolm hesitated, then said, Would you like to do this again? Yes, I'd like that a lot. He was quiet for a moment. Celeste, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Are you embarrassed by me? By where I'm from and what I do? The question hit her like a physical blow. Why would you ask that? Because in my experience, people like you don't usually date people like me. And when they do, it's often secret. Something they keep separate from their real lives. Celeste thought about her mother, about Evan, about the world she came from. Would she be embarrassed to bring Malcolm to a charity gala? Would she introduce him to her friends? I don't know, she said honestly. I want to say no, but I've never been in this situation before. I don't know how I'll react when it gets real. Malcolm nodded slowly. I appreciate the honesty, but I want to find out. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure it out, I can be patient. But I won't be a secret, Celeste. If we're going to do this, it has to be real. All the way real. I understand. Malcolm kissed her cheek gently before getting in his car. I'll call you tomorrow. Celeste drove home with her heart racing and her mind spinning. For the first time in her adult life, she was excited about a man who wasn't safe or predictable or mother-approved. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Over the next 2 weeks, Celeste and Malcolm fell into a rhythm. Coffee dates at Rita's. Walks through his neighborhood while he pointed out places from his childhood. One evening, he cooked dinner for her in the small apartment he shared with Nia. The apartment was tiny but spotless. The furniture was old, but well cared for. Photos covered the refrigerator. Malcolm and Nia at her high school graduation. Family pictures from when their mother was alive. Snapshots of friends and neighbors. It's not much, Malcolm said as he stirred pasta sauce on the small stove. It's perfect, Celeste said, and meant it. The apartment felt like a home in a way her penthouse never had. Nia had warmed up to her gradually. The teenager was still protective of her brother, but she'd started including Celeste in conversations instead of just watching her suspiciously. Malcolm says you went to private school, Nia said over dinner. I did, from kindergarten through high school. Was it like in movies, all snobby and competitive? Some of it, yeah. There was a lot of pressure to be perfect all the time. Sounds exhausting. It was. Celeste looked around the small dining area. This is much better. After dinner, Nia disappeared into her room to study. Malcolm and Celeste sat on his couch, close but not touching, watching an old movie on his small TV. Can I ask you something? Celeste said, during a commercial break. Always. What happened to your father? Malcolm was quiet for so long that Celeste thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke. Construction accident. I was 15. Nia was 8. Dad was working on a high-rise downtown when some scaffolding collapsed. His voice was steady, but his hands clenched in his lap. Mom never really recovered from losing him. She did her best, but she was sad all the time after that. I'm sorry. She died when I was 22. Heart attack, but I think it was really a broken heart. She missed Dad so much. Celeste thought about her own father, who'd died of cancer when she was 25. He'd been sick for months, and she'd had time to say goodbye. But she'd still felt lost and alone after he was gone. That's when you became responsible for Nia? Yeah. She was my parents' whole world, and they were hers. After Mom died, it was just us. Malcolm looked toward Nia's room. She's the smartest person I know. Honor roll every semester. Already got early admission to 3 colleges. You must be proud. Proud and terrified. College costs money we don't have. I've been saving, but it's not nearly enough. Celeste felt an urge to offer help, to write a check that would solve everything. But she remembered Malcolm's reaction to her money at the hotel lobby. Some things shouldn't be transactions. She'll figure it out, Celeste said instead. Smart kids usually do. I hope you're right. Later that night, as Malcolm walked her to her car, Celeste felt closer to him than she'd ever felt to anyone. Not just physically close, but emotionally connected, like he'd let her see the real parts of his life, not just the parts that were safe to share. Thank you for dinner, she said, and for letting me into your family. Thank you for wanting in. Malcolm kissed her then, soft and sweet under the streetlight. It was their first real kiss, and it felt like a promise of something deeper. But as Celeste drove home to her empty penthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that their 2 worlds were too different to ever really merge. The next week brought Celeste's first real test. Tessa knocked on her office door Wednesday morning with an urgent expression. Your mother called. She wants to have lunch today. Said it's important. Celeste's stomach dropped. Did she say what about? No, but she sounded determined. Diane had chosen the restaurant, of course, Le Bernardin, where power lunches happened and privacy was guaranteed by astronomical prices. Diane was already seated when Celeste arrived, perfectly dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Celeste, darling, you look tired. Hello, Mother. They ordered. Salads for both, as always, and made small talk about charity events and family friends. But Celeste could feel Diane building up to something. I've been hearing interesting things about you lately, Diane said as their food arrived. What kind of things? Things about your social life. About a man you've been seen with. Celeste's heart started beating faster. I'm dating someone. Is that a problem? That depends on who you're dating. Diane's voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Is it true that he's a mechanic? Among other things, yes. A black mechanic. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Celeste felt heat rise up her neck. His race shouldn't matter. Of course it matters, Celeste. Everything matters when you're in your position. Your choices reflect on the family, on the business, on everything your father built. Dad would want me to be happy. Your father would want you to be smart, to think about the bigger picture. Diane leaned forward. What happens when you bring this man to board meetings, to galas, to the country club? How do you think that will be received? Celeste thought about Malcolm in his coveralls, grease under his fingernails, patient and skilled as he fixed her car. Then she imagined him in a tuxedo at a charity gala, surrounded by people like her mother. Maybe those places are the problem, she said quietly. Excuse me? Maybe if those places can't accept a good man because of his job or his skin color, maybe I shouldn't want to be in those places either. Diane's expression hardened. That's very noble, dear, but it's also very naive. You can't change the world by making impractical romantic choices. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm trying to be happy. Happiness is a luxury you can't afford right now. You have responsibilities. To the family name, to the business, to the charitable foundations your father established. Celeste stared at her untouched salad. What if I don't want those responsibilities? Then you're more selfish than I raised you to be. The accusation stung because it felt partly true. Celeste had grown up with every advantage, every privilege. Did she owe something to the people who'd given her those things? Did she owe her life to her father's memory and her mother's expectations? "I need time to think," Celeste said. "Think all you want, but think carefully, and think about what's at stake." That evening, Celeste was supposed to meet Malcolm for dinner. Instead, she called and canceled, claiming a work emergency. She spent the night walking around her penthouse, looking at the expensive art and furniture that suddenly felt like a beautiful prison. Her phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. "Hope work isn't too stressful. Talk tomorrow?" She stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes, tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went without them talking. Celeste buried herself in work, attending meetings and approving budgets, and doing all the things a responsible heiress was supposed to do. Malcolm called Thursday evening. "Hey, stranger. I haven't heard from you in a couple days. I've been busy, work stuff. Everything okay? You sound distant." Celeste closed her eyes. She was sitting in her home office, surrounded by papers and reports about the family business. Everything her father had built. Everything she was supposed to protect and continue. "Can I ask you something?" she said, always. "Do you think people can really change? Or are we all just stuck being who we're born to be?" Malcolm was quiet for a moment. "That's a heavy question. What's got you thinking about it?" "Just life, I guess. I think people can change if they want to badly enough, but it's hard work, and it usually costs something." "Costs what?" "Whatever's keeping them stuck. Sometimes that's habits. Sometimes it's other people's expectations. Sometimes it's the comfort of staying safe." Celeste thought about her mother's words at lunch, about responsibilities and expectations and the bigger picture. What if changing means disappointing everyone you care about? Then maybe you need to figure out if those people actually care about you, or just about the version of you that makes them comfortable. After they hung up, Celeste sat in her office until late into the night, thinking about Malcolm's words. Did her mother actually care about her happiness, or just about maintaining the family image? Did Evan care about her, or about the idea of marrying someone appropriate? Did she care about being herself, or about being safe? Friday night, Celeste made a decision. She drove to Malcolm's neighborhood and knocked on his apartment door. He answered wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking surprised and pleased to see her. "Hey, I wasn't expecting you." "I know, I should have called, but..." She took a deep breath. "Can we talk?" Malcolm let her in. Naya was at the kitchen table doing homework, but she looked up and waved. "Hey, Celeste. Malcolm's been moping around here for 2 days wondering what he did wrong." "Naya," Malcolm warned. "What? It's true. You've been pathetic." Despite everything, Celeste smiled. "I owe you both an explanation." They sat on the couch while Nia pretended to study, but obviously listened to every word. Celeste told them about lunch with her mother, about the pressure and expectations, about the fear that she might not be strong enough to choose love over safety. "Your mom sounds like a piece of work," Nia said bluntly. "Nia," Malcolm said again. "I'm just saying, no offense, Celeste, but your family sounds exhausting." "They are exhausting." Celeste looked at Malcolm. "But they're also right about some things. Our worlds are different, really different. I don't know if I'm brave enough to bridge that gap." Malcolm reached for her hand. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm scared. Scared of disappointing everyone. Scared of making the wrong choice. Scared of not being enough for you and scared of being too much for my family." "So, what do you want to do?" Celeste looked around the small apartment, at Nia's textbooks spread across the table, at the photos on the refrigerator showing a family that had less money but more love than anything she'd grown up with, at Malcolm's steady brown eyes waiting for her answer. "I want to choose you," she said quietly. "I want to choose this, but I need to know that you'll be patient with me while I figure out how to do it." Malcolm squeezed her hand. "I can be patient." Even when I mess up? Because I probably will. I'm going to say the wrong things sometimes, and worry too much about what other people think, and maybe even hide sometimes when things get hard. Everyone messes up. The question is whether you learn from it and keep trying. From the kitchen table, Nia called out, "For the record, I like her better than your last girlfriend." "You never met my last girlfriend," Malcolm said. "Exactly. She was too embarrassed to come around here." Malcolm looked at Celeste seriously. "Is that what you're worried about? Being embarrassed by us?" "No." The answer came quickly and honestly. "I'm worried about you being embarrassed by me, by how sheltered and privileged and clueless I am about real life. You volunteered at the community center. You sat on my secondhand couch eating spaghetti out of mismatched bowls. You're here now, having this conversation instead of running away." Malcolm touched her cheek gently. "You're learning. That's all anyone can ask for." That night, Celeste stayed for dinner again. Afterward, she helped Nia with her college application essays while Malcolm did some freelance repair work at the kitchen table. It felt domestic and comfortable and real in a way that scared and thrilled her. When it was time to leave, Malcolm walked her to her car. "I have something to tell you," she said. "Next weekend is the Children's Hospital Gala. It's a big deal. All the biggest donors will be there, including my mother and all her friends." "Okay. I want you to come with me." Malcolm's eyebrows rose. "To a fancy hospital gala? With your mother and all her friends?" "Yes." "Celeste, are you sure?" "That sounds like jumping into the deep end." "I'm sure. I want to stop hiding. I want to choose you, publicly and completely." Malcolm studied her face. "What about a tuxedo? I don't exactly own formal wear." "We'll figure that out. The important thing is, will you come?" "If you're sure that's what you want." "I've never been more sure of anything." Malcolm kissed her then, and this time it felt like a promise they were both ready to keep. But as Celeste drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step off a cliff. The hospital gala would be the first time she'd introduced Malcolm to her world. The first time she'd chosen love over safety in public. She just hoped they'd both survive the landing. The week leading up to the gala passed in a blur of preparations and second thoughts. Celeste had arranged for Malcolm to be fitted for a tuxedo, which he'd agreed to reluctantly after she assured him she wasn't paying for it herself. Her assistant had found a sponsor who donated formal wear for charitable events. "You're nervous," Tessa observed Thursday afternoon as Celeste paced around her office. "I'm not nervous. I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of everything. Of how Malcolm will feel surrounded by all those people. Of what my mother will say. Of making a fool of myself. Or maybe you're terrified that it will go perfectly, and you'll have to admit that you've been worried about the wrong things this whole time." Tessa, as usual, was probably right. Friday evening, the night before the gala, Malcolm picked Celeste up for dinner at a small restaurant in his neighborhood. She'd been there several times now, and the owner always greeted her warmly and asked about her work. "You're quiet tonight," Malcolm said over dinner. "Just thinking about tomorrow." Having second thoughts, Celeste looked across the table at him. Even dressed casually, Malcolm was handsome in a way that made her heart skip. But more than that, he was good. Kind and honest and real in a way that made everyone around him better. "No second thoughts," she said. "But I need you to know something." "What?" "Tomorrow night is going to be hard. Not because of you, because of them. Some of those people are going to say things, or look at us in ways that might hurt. They're going to judge you based on things that have nothing to do with who you are." Malcolm reached across the table and took her hand. "I know that. And they're going to judge me for choosing you. They're going to think I'm making a mistake, or going through a phase, or trying to prove something." "Are you?" "No. I'm trying to choose love over fear, but it's going to get ugly before it gets better." Malcolm squeezed her fingers. I can handle ugly, Celeste. The question is, can you? She thought about her mother's disapproval, about losing friends who couldn't accept her choices, about possibly having to choose between Malcolm and everything she'd been raised to value. I guess we'll find out tomorrow night. Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear. Celeste spent the afternoon getting ready, hair, makeup, the works. Her dress was midnight blue silk that cost more than Malcolm made in a month, but it made her feel confident and beautiful. Malcolm picked her up at 7, and when she opened her penthouse door, her breath caught. He looked incredible in the black tuxedo, tall and handsome and elegant in a way that would make every other man at the gala fade into the background. "Wow," she said. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Malcolm's eyes traveled over her dress appreciatively. "Ready for this?" "No, but let's do it anyway." The ride to the hotel was quiet. Celeste's hands shook slightly, and Malcolm noticed. "Hey." He covered her hand with his. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready." "I'm ready. I'm just scared." "Of what, specifically?" "Of them not accepting you. Of you seeing how shallow and awful my world can be. Of this being the beginning of the end for us." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "Celeste, I need you to understand something. I'm not going tonight to be accepted by your world. I'm going because you asked me to, and because I care about you. But I won't pretend to be something I'm not to make other people comfortable. I wouldn't want you to." "Good. Because if these people can't see what I see when I look at you, someone kind and generous who's trying to grow into the person she wants to be, then they're not worth impressing." As they pulled up to the hotel, Celeste felt some of her nervousness ease. Malcolm was right. She wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone except herself. She was doing this because she loved him. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. The Children's Hospital Gala was everything Celeste had expected and worse. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Wealthy donors air-kissed and made small talk about vacation homes and stock portfolios. Everyone looked perfect and said the right things and donated money to feel good about themselves. Celeste felt Malcolm tense beside her as they entered the ballroom. "You okay?" she whispered. "Fine. Just taking it all in." They found their assigned table, carefully selected by Celeste to include some of her more open-minded acquaintances. But even the safe people stared when they saw Malcolm. Polite smiles faltered slightly before snapping back into place. "Celeste, darling." Her college roommate Sarah approached with her husband in tow. "You look stunning, and this must be—" "Malcolm Reed," Celeste said firmly. "Malcolm, this is Sarah and David Morrison." Malcolm shook hands with both of them, his grip confident and his smile genuine. "Nice to meet you." "So, Malcolm, what do you do?" David asked with the particular tone rich people used when they already knew the answer would disappoint them. "I'm a mechanic. I also drive part-time for rideshare." An awkward silence fell over the group. Sarah recovered first. "How interesting. Manual labor is so important to society." Malcolm's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "I enjoy working with my hands. There's something satisfying about fixing things that are broken." Before anyone could respond, Diane Hart appeared beside them like a storm cloud in designer clothing. "Celeste." Diane's voice was ice cold. "I'd like you to meet someone." Behind Diane stood Evan Klein, in an expensive tuxedo, looking every inch the perfect society husband. His smile was confident and possessive. "Hello, Celeste. You look beautiful tonight." Celeste felt Malcolm's hand tighten on her arm, not possessively, but supportively, like he was reminding her that she had a choice. "Hello, Evan. This is Malcolm Reed. Malcolm, Evan Klein." The two men shook hands, and the tension was immediate. Evan's grip lasted a second too long, his smile a degree too sharp. Malcolm remained polite, but unimpressed. Malcolm Reed, Evan repeated. The name sounds familiar. Don't I know you from somewhere? I don't think so. I'm sure it'll come to me. Diane stepped closer to Celeste. Evan has been telling me about his plans for the new hotel development downtown. Very ambitious project. Very lucrative. Mother, we're at a charity gala. Maybe we could talk business later. Of course, dear. I just thought you'd be interested in hearing about ventures that actually build wealth instead of... Diane's eyes flicked to Malcolm. Other pursuits. Malcolm's face showed nothing, but Celeste felt humiliated for both of them. If you'll excuse us, she said tightly, I'd like to show Malcolm around. She guided Malcolm away from the group, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. I'm sorry, she said when they were out of earshot. My mother can be. Honest about how she feels? Malcolm's voice was calm but distant. Don't apologize for her, Celeste. That's who she is. They found a quiet corner near the silent auction tables. Around them, the party continued, laughter and conversation and the gentle clink of expensive glasses. This is harder than I thought it would be, Celeste admitted. What part? Watching them dismiss you. Watching them treat you like you're not good enough when you're better than all of them combined. Malcolm turned to face her fully. You can't control what other people think or say. You can only control how you respond. How are you so calm about this? Because I've been dealing with this my whole life. Rich people who think my worth is measured by my bank account. People who assume they know everything about me based on my address or my job. Malcolm's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. The difference is, tonight I'm not alone. Before Celeste could respond, a commotion near the bar caught their attention. Someone was laughing too loudly, and other guests were turning to stare. Evan Klein stood with a group of young men, all holding drinks, and looking pleased with themselves. One of them was holding up his phone, showing something to the others. Celeste's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Malcolm asked, noticing her expression. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling. They moved closer, and Celeste caught fragments of conversation. Can't believe she actually wrote that. Too humble for her lifestyle. Slumming it with the help. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Celeste grabbed Malcolm's arm, but he was already pulling away, his face hard with understanding. Malcolm, wait! But he was walking toward Evan's group, his stride purposeful and controlled. Celeste hurried after him, panic rising in her throat. Excuse me, Malcolm said, his voice cutting through the laughter. I think you have something that belongs to me. Evan turned, his smile sharp and satisfied. Malcolm, there you are. We were just admiring your girlfriend's honesty about her dating preferences. He held up his phone, showing a screenshot of the group text message Celeste had sent weeks ago. The message about black men being too humble for her lifestyle. The words hung in the air like poison. Around them, other guests had started to notice the tension. Some moved closer, drawn by the promise of drama at a boring charity event. Malcolm's face was stone. Where did you get that? A mutual friend thought I should know what kind of woman I was competing for. Evan's voice was loud enough for others to hear. Though I have to say, I'm surprised. I didn't think Celeste was the type to experiment. That's enough. Celeste stepped between them, her voice shaking with anger and shame. Evan, put your phone away. Why? Ashamed of your own words? Evan's smile was cruel. Though I suppose things make more sense now. You're not really dating him, are you? This is just some kind of charity project. Very noble of you slumming it with the poor black mechanic. Malcolm's hands clenched into fists, but his voice stayed level. You're talking about the woman I love. I suggest you choose your next words carefully. Love? Evan laughed. Come on, we all know what this really is. Rich girl feels guilty about her privilege. decides to play with someone beneath her station to feel better about herself. It's a classic. The crowd around them had grown larger. Celeste could see phones being pulled out, the promise of gossip spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. "You don't know anything about us," Celeste said, her voice stronger now. "Don't I? I know you wrote that message. I know you really think black men are too humble for your lifestyle. So what is this? Some kind of rebellion against your mother? A way to prove how progressive you are?" Malcolm looked at Celeste then, and the hurt in his eyes was devastating. "Is that what this is?" he asked quietly. "Am I your rebellion?" "No, Malcolm, no. That message was... It was before I knew you, before I understood anything. But you wrote it. Yes, and I was wrong. Completely, horribly wrong." Malcolm nodded slowly, like something inside him was breaking. "I need some air." He walked away, leaving Celeste standing in the middle of the crowd with Evan's satisfied smile and dozens of curious eyes watching her fall apart. She followed Malcolm outside, her heels clicking against the marble floor of the hotel lobby. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the building, his hands in his pockets, staring up at the city lights. "Malcolm, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you meant every word you wrote?" "No. I was wrong. I was ignorant and privileged and honest." Malcolm turned to face her. "That message was you being honest about how you really felt. It was me being the person I was before I met you. Before you showed me how wrong I was about everything. Or maybe it was you being the person you've always been. And this," he gestured between them, "is the experiment." Tears stung Celeste's eyes. "You don't believe that." "I don't know what to believe. 3 weeks ago, you thought men like me were beneath you. Now you claim to love me. Which version is real?" "This version. The woman standing here fighting for us is real." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the city hummed with life. Traffic and sirens and the distant sound of music from other parties in other hotels. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to think about this." "How much time?" "I don't know. However long it takes for me to figure out if I can trust you. If I can trust that you won't wake up one day and decide I really am too humble for your lifestyle." Celeste felt her heart breaking. "Malcolm, I love you. Maybe you do. But love isn't enough if you're ashamed of who I am." "I'm not ashamed." "Then why didn't you tell me about the message? Why did I have to find out from that asshole in front of half the city's social elite?" Celeste opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. Because he was right. She'd hidden the message because she was ashamed of it. And maybe deep down, she was still ashamed of the parts of herself that had written it. "I'll call you," Malcolm said quietly, "when I'm ready to talk." He walked away, leaving Celeste standing alone on the sidewalk in her expensive dress, watching the man she loved disappear into the night. The next few days passed in a haze of humiliation and heartbreak. The story of the gala had spread quickly through social media and gossip columns. Photos of Celeste and Malcolm together, followed by speculation about their relationship and the leaked message. Celeste stayed home from work, ignoring calls from her mother and text messages from friends offering sympathy or seeking details. She sat in her penthouse feeling empty and lost. On Wednesday, Tessa showed up with coffee and groceries. "You look terrible," Tessa said, setting bags on the kitchen counter. "Thanks, that helps." "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't ice cream?" "I don't remember." Tessa started making sandwiches. "So what's the plan?" "What plan?" "The plan to fix this mess and get your man back." "There is no plan. I screwed up. I hurt him. It's over." "Is it?" "Because yesterday I saw Malcolm at Rodriguez Auto Repair, and he looked about as miserable as you do." Celeste looked up from her position on the couch. "You went to his garage." "I had a flat tire. Pure coincidence. Tessa brought her a sandwich and sat down. But he asked about you. Asked if you were okay. What did you tell him? The truth. That you're falling apart and you love him and you're too proud to fight for him. I'm not too proud. I'm too broken. I wrote that message, Tessa. I really believe those things about him. About men like him. How do I come back from that? By proving that you've changed. By showing him that the woman he fell in love with is who you really are now, not who you used to be. How? Figure it out. But figure it out fast, because pride is a cold comfort when you're sleeping alone. That evening, Celeste drove to Malcolm's neighborhood. She didn't go to his apartment or the garage. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, she went to Alma's coffee shop and sat by the window, thinking. The neighborhood was the same as always. Kids playing on the sidewalks, neighbors talking over fences, people living their lives without drama or pretense. Real people doing real things. This was Malcolm's world, not perfect, but honest. Not wealthy, but rich in the ways that actually mattered. She thought about the message she'd sent, about the woman who'd written those words. That woman had been afraid of anything that didn't fit into her narrow definition of success. That woman had measured people's worth by their bank accounts and their social connections. That woman had been small and scared and alone. The woman sitting in this coffee shop was different. She'd learned to see people for who they really were instead of what they had. She'd learned that love was more important than approval, that character mattered more than status. But how could she prove that to Malcolm? How could she show him that her growth was real and permanent? The answer came to her slowly, like dawn breaking over the city. She had to choose him publicly and completely, not just at fancy galas where she could be dismissed as rebelling, but in ways that couldn't be misunderstood or explained away. The next morning, Celeste called Tessa into her office. "I need you to schedule a board meeting," she said. "Full board, emergency session." "What's the emergency?" "I'm about to make some changes that they're not going to like." The board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Celeste spent 2 days preparing, making calls and putting together documents. When Friday arrived, she dressed carefully in her most professional suit and walked into the Hart Industries conference room with a folder full of papers and a heart full of determination. The board members looked curious and slightly concerned. Diane sat at the far end of the table, her expression unreadable. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Celeste began. "I've called this meeting to announce some changes to my role in the company and to discuss some new initiatives I'd like the board to consider." She opened her folder and distributed copies of the documents she'd prepared. "First, I'm stepping down as interim CEO. I'll remain on the board and maintain my ownership stake, but I want to pursue other interests." Shocked murmurs filled the room. Diane's face went pale. "Celeste," her mother said carefully, "this is very sudden. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, Mother. I've made my decision." Celeste turned to address the full board. "I'm starting a foundation focused on job training and education programs for low-income communities. The foundation will be funded by my personal assets and will operate independently of Hart Industries." More murmurs, some approval, some concern. "Additionally," Celeste continued, "I'm proposing that Hart Industries establish a partnership with several community organizations to provide internships and job training for young people who might not otherwise have access to professional opportunities." One of the older board members, Mr. Harrison, spoke up. "These are admirable goals, Celeste, but they represent a significant shift in company focus." "Not company focus. My focus. The partnership I'm proposing would be voluntary and philanthropic. Hart Industries would benefit from the positive publicity and community relationships, and we'd be doing genuine good." Diane's voice was cold. "And I suppose this sudden interest in community outreach has nothing to do with your recent personal associations?" The room went quiet. Everyone knew about the gala incident, about the leaked message and the public drama. My personal relationships have shown me that this company, that I, have been too isolated from the communities we claim to serve. Celeste met her mother's eyes steadily. I've learned that there are good, talented, hard-working people out there who deserve opportunities they're not getting because they don't have the right connections or come from the right families. And you think your foundation will solve that? I think it's a start. And I think it's something my father would have supported. The mention of her father shifted the energy in the room. Several board members nodded thoughtfully. The foundation will focus specifically on automotive and technical training programs, Celeste continued, partnering with existing community organizations to provide real job skills and career pathways. After an hour of discussion and questions, the board voted to approve the partnership proposal and accepted Celeste's resignation as interim CEO. As the members filed out, Diane approached her daughter. "I hope you know what you're doing," Diane said quietly. "I do. For the first time in my life, I actually do. And this foundation, it's not just about impressing some man." Celeste looked at her mother, really looked at her. Diane was beautiful and poised and utterly convinced that love was a luxury that practical people couldn't afford. "It's about becoming the person I want to be," Celeste said, "whether that impresses anyone or not." That evening, Celeste sat in her apartment drafting a press release about her foundation and the new partnership. She'd scheduled interviews with several business publications, making sure the story would be covered widely. But more importantly, she'd scheduled a visit to Rodriguez Auto Repair for Monday morning. Not to see Malcolm, she wasn't ready for that yet, but to talk to Mr. Rodriguez about the foundation, about creating real opportunities for young people in the neighborhood, about proving that her transformation was genuine and lasting. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Nia's name appeared on the screen. "Hello, Celeste? It's Nia. I got your number from Malcolm's phone. Don't tell him I called. Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay. My brother is miserable, and you're miserable, and this whole thing is stupid." Despite everything, Celeste almost smiled. "It's complicated, Nia." "No, it's not. You wrote something stupid before you knew better. Then you learned better. Then some asshole used your old stupidity to hurt both of you. That's not complicated. That's just life. Malcolm doesn't trust me anymore. Malcolm is scared. There's a difference." Nia's voice was matter-of-fact. "He's scared that you'll wake up one day and realize your mother was right, that he's not worth the trouble." "He is worth the trouble." "Then prove it. Stop hiding in your fancy apartment feeling sorry for yourself and prove it." After Nia hung up, Celeste sat thinking about the teenager's words. Stop hiding and prove it. But how? The answer came to her while she was brushing her teeth. Simple and terrifying and exactly right. Saturday morning, Celeste drove to Rodriguez Auto Repair. The garage was busy with weekend customers, and she could see Malcolm under the hood of a sedan, his movements focused and skilled. She didn't go inside. Instead, she parked across the street and waited. Around noon, Malcolm emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He wore coveralls over a gray t-shirt, his hair slightly messed from work. He looked tired and sad, and so handsome that Celeste's chest ached. She got out of her car and walked across the street. Malcolm saw her coming and froze. "Celeste." "Hi." They stood facing each other in the parking lot, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "I heard about the board meeting," Malcolm said quietly. "About your foundation. Word travels fast. Nia may have mentioned it. She called me last night, told me to stop hiding and prove that I'm worth fighting for." Malcolm's expression softened slightly. "You don't have to prove anything to me." "Yes, I do." Celeste took a deep breath. "I have to prove that the woman who wrote that message isn't who I am anymore. I have to prove that my love for you isn't charity or rebellion or some rich girl playing around. How do you plan to do that? By choosing you. Every day, in every way that matters. By building something that honors what you've taught me about real work and real worth. She pulled a folded paper from her purse. I wrote you a letter. Everything I should have said at the gala. Everything I've been thinking this week. But the important part is this. She looked at him directly, her voice strong and clear. I love you, Malcolm Reed. I love your integrity and your kindness and the way you see the best in people. I love that you work with your hands and take pride in fixing things. I love that you've built a life based on honor instead of money. Malcolm's eyes were bright, but he didn't speak. I wrote that message because I was small and scared and ignorant. But that's not who I am now. You showed me who I could be. Someone who values character over connections. Someone who sees people instead of status symbols. Celeste. I'm not finished. Her voice was shaking, but determined. I know you need time to trust me again. I know I have to earn back what I lost. But I'm not giving up on us. I'm going to keep showing up, keep proving that I've changed, until you believe it. She held out the letter. This explains everything. The foundation, the job training programs, why I stepped down from the company. All of it. But mostly it explains that you didn't change me. You helped me become who I was supposed to be all along. Malcolm took the letter, his fingers brushing hers briefly. What if I'm not ready? What if I need more time? Then I'll wait, however long it takes. What about your mother? Your world? They're not going to accept this. Then I'll build a new world. One where love matters more than approval. They stood in the parking lot, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Around them, the neighborhood hummed with life. Kids playing, music from open windows, the sound of people living honest, complicated, beautiful lives. I miss you, Malcolm said quietly. I miss you too. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. I love you too, Celeste. That was never the question. Then what was? Whether you loved yourself enough to choose what you really wanted instead of what you thought you should want. And? Malcolm reached up and touched her cheek gently. I think you just answered that question. When he kissed her, there in the parking lot of Rodriguez Auto Repair, it felt like coming home. Like finding the missing piece of herself that she'd been searching for without knowing it. So what now? Celeste asked when they broke apart. Now we figure it out. Together. What about the foundation? What about it? I want your help. With the automotive training programs, with connecting to the community. I want to do this right, and I can't do that without you. Malcolm smiled. The first real smile she'd seen from him in a week. I might know a few people who could help. Good, because I have a lot to learn. We all do. That's the point. As they walked toward the garage together, Celeste felt lighter than she had in days. There would be challenges ahead. Her mother's disapproval, society's judgment, the hard work of building something meaningful. But they would face it together. Love had been tested, and love had won. 6 months later, Celeste stood in the bright, newly renovated space that housed the Heart Community Foundation. The walls were covered with photos of the first graduating class of automotive technicians, young people who now had good jobs at shops throughout the city. Malcolm emerged from the workshop area, grease on his hands and satisfaction on his face. How'd the interviews go? Celeste asked. Good, really good. We've got 12 new students starting next month, including 3 women. That's amazing. Malcolm washed his hands at the utility sink they'd installed near his desk. As the Foundation's director of technical training, he split his time between teaching and administration. It was the perfect combination of his skills and his desire to help people. Your mother called, he said, drying his hands. Something about dinner Sunday night. Celeste groaned. Did she sound disapproving, or just resigned? Hard to tell. Maybe both. Diane had eventually come around, sort of. She still didn't understand Celeste's choices, but she'd stopped actively fighting them. Especially after the foundation started getting positive press and Hart Industries' community partnerships improved the company's public image. Naya called too, Malcolm continued. She got into Northwestern with a full academic scholarship. That's wonderful. You must be so proud. Terrified and proud. Malcolm pulled Celeste into his arms. She's going to study engineering. Says she wants to design cars, not just fix them. They stood together in the middle of the workshop, surrounded by the tools and workbenches where young people learned skills that would change their lives. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with the same energy it always had. But now it felt like home to both of them. Any regrets? Malcolm asked, his voice soft. Celeste thought about her penthouse apartment, which she'd sold to fund the foundation, about the board positions she'd given up and the social invitations that had dried up, about the life she'd left behind in favor of this messier, more complicated, infinitely more meaningful one. Just one, she said. Malcolm's eyebrows rose. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to figure out that love is supposed to make you brave, not safe. Malcolm kissed her then, and it still felt like the best decision she'd ever made. Around them, the workshop waited for Monday morning, when new students would arrive to learn new skills and build new futures. It wasn't the life Celeste had been raised to want, but it was the life she'd chosen, and that made all the difference. Love had won, but more importantly, they had won. Together, honestly, completely. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.